friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I came here to podcast with friends. Yo, I changed it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at an Airbnb on tour, and I got two guests just to say what's up at the beginning who happened to crash with me last night. I don't know where they came from. The first one is known as MC Frontalot.
Hi, I'm an itinerant farm worker from the 30s. I just wandered over here. I don't know.
We're going to go work on a ranch and hopefully not crush some puppy skulls. Nice, man. That's sad, dude. And then from the mean streets of Metropolis, wearing black, loving Batman and Darth Vader, Schaefer the Dark Lord is here to just say hi.
I'm not even technically on this episode.
But you know who is on this episode? A friend who has brought us all together, who's been a big supportive guy in the scene, Brendan B. Brown of Wheatus. And so in the van, we listened to part one, and I wanted to just ask my tour mates what their thoughts were on the part one of the MC Lars podcast with our mutual friend, Brendan B. Brown. Did we capture him correctly?
I've known that dude for years, and yet I found the interview insightful and revealing. There's all this stuff I don't know about his past in the mean streets of Northport.
Where he almost got beat up in that fight. That's crazy.
Yeah, I had no idea he grew up in a violent post-apocalyptic movie.
What I liked about the interview was his talking about, you know, how much he was dedicated to playing guitar on the weekends. And you really could see in like, you know, that 10,000 hours or whatever, that's that Malcolm Gladwell idea that if you do something enough, you become a virtuoso. And he kind of reveals it. Kind of like these fools I'm touring with. So they're not fools. So I'm out with Schaefer the Dark Lord, Mega Ran, and MC Frontalot. Mega Ran's not here because we stayed in Phoenix last night. This is his hometown. Don't worry, I won't say his address, but I will say he's a great guy.
It's at the corner of...
No, don't say it. This is the corner of Doom and Catastrophe. That's a reference to an old Frontalot song.
Typical Lars accuracy. You have nailed my lyric.
What is it? What is it? Dude and Catastrophe? Whatever. So we had this joke on tour where I'll quote people's songs like wrong, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's not it. Oh, you're passionate about my project. It's not vindicated because you got it wrong." No. and then we quote, but then it's become this joke where we quote each other wrong on purpose. And anyway, okay. So we also got to hear the new Frontalot album that drops December 7th, 3rd,
4th, or I don't even know.
But
Something like that.
And then Schaefer's new album came out. But enough of that. I want to give a shout out to the Patreon supporters. We got some new supporters this week. Shout out to Belmura and Yvonne Hork. Y'all are very supportive, and you have the two of the coolest names of any of my Patreon homies. Also, we're doing the Chronicles of Narnia, so we got the horse and this boy coming out. Also, guess what's up? I want to give a shout out to Logan and Kirsty, two OG Patreon supporters who've been down for the cause for a while. So anyway, without much further ado, I'm going to play this interview with Brendan B. Brown. Afterwards, we're going to debut a Wheatus song, which isn't actually on Spotify yet, that Matt, the bassist, sent me, that they asked me to play. That's tight, right?
Exciting.
Yeah, so new Wheatus jam, friendship, and this episode goes into his dealings with the major labels, how he kind of like navigated his way to have a hit, what it was like making the video, and then the fallout for when, oh no, we only sold 25,000 copies, whatever. Oh no. And Brendan was like, wait. He's like, maybe I should get a day job. And they're like, okay, you sarcastic punk. And he's like, no, I should get a day job. And I don't know about this. And guess what? 20 years later, Brendan B. Brown is still crushing it. Let's get going with the episode. And afterwards, we're going to end with some final thoughts, y'all. Okay, so just to shift gears a little bit, I remember hearing this record of yours that we'd play on tour, and that I didn't know the story about it, and a kid brought you to sign it in like Scotland, this Mr. Jones project.
Sure.
What's the story with that? And how does that relate to everything we've been talking about your influences?
Right. So shortly after I had this, I was a lead guitar player and songwriter in a sort of quasi hardcore rock band called Bandersnatch. And that was where I discovered Walt Mink. Those guys had somebody knew Dave Hill. Somebody had gone to Fordham with Dave Hill, and I wound up becoming a kind of Sons of Elvis fan. And anyway, it's a long buried story. But the short point is that when my hardcore band, quote unquote, fell apart, I started writing for my own voice. And that was where Dirtbag came from, and a lot of the songs for the first record came from. that immediate aftermath of that, like 90, 94, 95, 96. And in late 96, I was introduced to, I was also in another band called Hope Factory at the time. I was a lead guitar player in a band called Hope Factory with this guy, Ali Nambar, who was the first really, truly genius songwriter I had ever seen that I got to work with personally. He was incredible. And he also knew how to produce his own records. So I was learning from that experience. At the same time, I got approached by the guys in my old hardcore band about this rapper guy named Ali D, who wanted to put a record together. And I went in and began laying down tracks in his studio of stuff that I was experimenting with that had my voice. And I was kind of like replacing my voice with what I thought he was going to wind up doing, kind of thing, and crafting the songs that way. And I spent 9 months, the better part of 9 months, driving into Manhattan after my day job in Syosset, Long Island. I was fixing printers and computers and things. And
in the Chrysler Building, right?
Yeah, well, that was later on. Yes,
Yeah.
I did have an opportunity. I did work in the Chrysler Building fixing printers for 2 weeks. The top of the Chrysler Building is something else, man. Let me tell you. But anyway, so I was writing this stuff, and I was very much in the sort of prototype phase on the Wheatus record. I wasn't even telling people I was doing it. Like I wasn't showing anybody anything. I was still pretty insecure about where my own voice was or how I was going to find it and how I was going to sing and play guitar at the same time and all these things. Basically, I was so inspired by John Kimbrough to actually do that I figured I could probably figure out how to do it my own way. So I was taking some of these riffs and things that I was playing around with and making them into this Mr. Jones record with an engineer, a really talented engineer named Todd Childress, who was working at the studio there on, I think it was 28th Street or 26th Street. I can't remember where it was, but we were making this record for 9 months. I drove in from Syosset and spent, 7:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. making this recording. And the other two guys from my hardcore band were involved, drums and bass. And they were submitting their own stuff too. They were writing a little bit for it as well. And this was suddenly morphed into something that seemed very serious because Michael Bolton's manager came on board somehow. I don't know how that happened. And they were shopping it all of a sudden. And then there's this period where it stopped calling me back after I finished recording. And during that period, they got a big deal with Al Cafaro at A&M Records. They got a huge record deal, like a 90s record deal, like the old school one. And I found myself kind of suddenly on the outs of it. I was on the outside looking in after being in the studio the whole time. And I had failed to have the conversation about securing my part of the financial side of the whole thing. So at the very tail end of it, I had to kind of assert myself, which didn't work out well, as you would assume. Back then, it was easier to get screwed, I think, if you were a writer. Now you can write something and put it into the U.S. Copyright Office and submit it to your BMI by yourself. And back then, all that stuff was really hard to do. Like you couldn't just, you had to know somebody to get that done and get the forms and all the stuff, So
I remember you said like you could have an intern at a label put his or her name on as a co-writer.
that was a thing that could happen. Yeah.
When all this happened, then did you talk to him like friend to friend, or was it kind of like?
Well, I attempted many kind of like, aren't we a band conversations, and I found out through the course of those conversations that it was kind of more to it than that. Like that I was a small fish in a big pond, and that my contribution was being viewed in a way that was kind of work for hire. And, it's not a lot of guys who hold down that kind of schedule for 9 months if it's a work for hire. It's kind of, you're burning the candle at both ends because you want to see the project through.
And you have a song about it, right? With Wheatus.
Yeah, there's one song on the first record that kind of addresses these things. It's kind of, I just cut and pasted verbatim one of the arguments that I had with a management assistant on the phone. But in the end, the they saw through to pay me something that made sense for work for hire. And with that money, I bought the first 3 recording decks for album 1, the first Wheatus record. I bought 3 DA38 machines, Tascam machines, and I bought a Joe Meek preamp and a fancy microphone and a couple of other things to get me started on truly making multi-track demos of what would become album 1. And quite a bit of that survived and became album 1.
So even though it didn't work out as well financially as it did for him, it was able to launch your being able to create and own your master, right?
I am actually grateful for the experience because I was in a studio for a very long time, getting a really firsthand information on how to engineer a record from Todd, and paying close attention and absorbing it all. And then on the heels of that, I got firsthand information of how the record industry works, and that came in handy later.
Yeah.
So while the record was finished and came out, and the way that the lyrics and the vocal delivery were finished came out, I was like not quite as enthused about being part of it because I felt like, well, it didn't represent me the way that I wanted to be. And so I migrated all of my work that I cared about over to a full-time rethinking of how to have a band myself. And that was from the middle of 97 through to 1999 was when Wheatus was in full beta mode, like beta testing, like doing shows in the city. We bounced between the Luna Lounge, the old Luna Lounge on Ludlow. Hi, Rob Sacker. You're amazing. Thank you. And the Mercury Lounge around the corner. And we planned it very carefully. We wanted it to be a good night for the clubs because we knew that was the way to get invited back. Duh. So we made sure that it was as close to the weekend as we could, or as close to college vacation time as we could. And once every 3 months or 2.5 months, we played one of those 2 places, and we built a crowd that would come to our shows. And we had lines out the door for our final couple of Luna Lounge and Mercury Lounge shows.
So what were ways of promotion back then?
Little 4x6 cards that you cut up yourself out of poster board after you had them printed, like
just handing them out.
Just handing them out. Wow. and keeping in touch with people. People used to call each other and check in, like friends, old friends from when you were a kid or whatever, and college people and like people you worked with. People used to call each other a lot and just kind of like, hey man, thinking of you, that's a text now.
Yeah.
Right. But it used to be like, oh, hey dude, I just want to check in, see how you doing, what's going on. And you'd have a 15-minute conversation with somebody who you hadn't talked to in a month.
And you dropped that you were playing sometimes?
You'd be like, hey man, you want to come hang out? We're having a party after at this place, but we're playing a show first. And you want to come down, hang out.
Because music really drove the culture and drove a social need, right?
We kind of saw the show as an opportunity to get together with people we knew, to hang out with them.
Yeah.
And we made sure that there was a place to go afterwards where we were going to kind of burn it down a little bit, so that it wasn't just a hit and run, so that there was a real social engagement happening. So
the seeds of this then led to your first deal, right?
Yes. And I should mention, during this time in the 90s, Hope Factory toured with Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Oh, cool.
Which was the first real management deal that ever came around was for Hope Factory. And it was Kenny Laguna who signed Hope Factory to Blackheart Records, to Blackheart Management. And we did a bunch of dates on the East Coast with Joan Jett. And that was like, holy crap, this woman is a real rock star. Like, she's so powerful up there and in control of her instrument and her voice and her band. And it was really humbling. She was intense and sort of like this dark, powerful figure to me who I looked up to and was a little bit scared of, intimidated by, but on a fan level, like, I watched you when I was a little kid. Kind of like, I can't believe I'm doing this. It was a really valuable experience. Get throwing instruments and stuff into a van to go to Virginia to play a show with Joan Jett and then come back home the same day, kind of thing.
And then playing for fans who obviously were new, right? Who hadn't seen you on YouTube or Spotify.
There was no such thing. It was 1996.
So it taught you got your performance chops up.
Got my sort of, you better get comfortable on stage really quick chops up.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually playing better, I don't think. I was just kind of learning how to settle myself. Like, be settled with your gear. Remember to run your cable through your strap and plug it in, or else it'll get unplugged. So we didn't have any guitar techs, right? We were doing it ourselves. We were on our own in front of 3,000 Joan Jett fans who weren't too into us, fair enough, but it was that valuable experience that way. And there was a guy who worked for Kenny Laguna at the time, worked for Blackheart. There was two guys, Jason Abbey and John Lennon, his real name, not a stage name. Anyway, John became a promoter in the city. He was a party promoter. And he was kind enough to help us get our after parties together. He saw the show as an opportunity to clear out the Mercury Lounge and bring everybody over to, you name it, the place he was having a party.
Mm-hmm.
So we partnered that way, and we made sure that everybody knew where the after party was, because the after party was where we got to hang out, And at the time, New York City was still a place where your gear got stolen out of your car if you parked it there. So that happened a few times, but that was the price you paid for going into Manhattan and utilizing this energy of the city and this mechanism of the city to advance your cause, So yeah, it was totally worth it.
So the label people saw you and they saw the buzz and they heard the songs and.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. Somebody who knew somebody who worked at Columbia Records found themselves at an after party. Okay. Not the show, the after party. And then the following show...
Were people wearing like Wheatus shirts and...
People were carrying around burnt CDs that I had burnt them on my CD burner.
Okay,
because I was giving them away. Apogee CDs, the old gold Apogee CDs. I was burning on a tower and giving them away. Early versions of Teenage Dirtbag and a couple of other songs. We called it Teenage Dirtbag and Friends. And I guess when the label guy who was an assistant, Steve Ramirez, saw a CD being passed around, he wanted to know where it came from, and he came to I think he came to the next show, and then after that, he brought his boss, who was Kevin Patrick, A&R, the strangest, coolest A&R guy at Columbia Records, and he was dark horse as hell up there, which we came to find out wasn't too much to our benefit in the end when it came to the international company. Kevin's vibes were really cool, but they didn't extend overseas and they didn't extend to the rest of the company. So he gave us a good impression of Columbia Records. And he also was cool with us producing our own first album, which was also unheard of at the time. So, but before that, he was just tagging along at the word of his assistant, who was a really, really smart music kid, Steve was. And they just showed up and they were like, we love this. And then Kevin got one of those burnt Apogee CDs, and he went up to Donnie Einer's office that following Monday and he played it for him. That's it. And he said, sign this right away. That's what I heard. That's how it was told to me. So
yeah.
And in the end of 1999, we signed a deal memo with Columbia Records because I remember them saying, we want to seal this up before the end of the year. We don't want it to go till next year. So they did. And we were signed to Columbia Records in December of 1999. And then the following March, we were signed to EMI for our publishing.
And then the album came out like the summer? 2000?
So the mix of Teenage Dirtbag was finished by Dave Thoner, who also mixed "Missing You" by John Waite and "For Those About to Rock" by AC/DC, which is why I liked him as the mixing engineer. And it was the end of April of 2000 that he returned his mix of Teenage Dirtbag. And Kevin, we listened to it in Kevin's office, and it was incredible. He had nailed the shit out of it. Kevin gave me this look, like he wasn't big on talking, but he gave me this look like, "Oh, you're in trouble now. Like this is gonna go do something. You're fucked," which was great because that kind of set us straight on what it means,
Yeah.
But we went down to Nashville in the next couple of weeks, and we brought our hodgepodge of tapes that we made in my mother's house. I should backtrack a little bit. Before we sent anything to Dave Thoner to be mixed, we spent the entire month of March in my mother's house re-recording and finishing up all the stuff I had worked on from 95 until then. So we picked the final roster of songs. We recorded real drums and real everything, and we finished the album, multi-track. And that was nuts because I was still working a day job in Times Square, the place that put me to work in the Chrysler building for 2 weeks, and taking the train out to my mother's house like at 6 p.m. and working until 4 a.m, not sleeping sometimes, getting right back on the train and going back into work.
You were tracking drums at like 4 a.m?
Yeah, we were tracking drums at 4 a.m. in my mother's house while my parents were upstairs trying to sleep.
Wow, what great parents!
It was
man.
it was in the basement, so it was hard to hear.
Yeah,
but and we did everything we could we put mattresses up on the walls, and we put big foam pieces across the gate, the door jamb, so that it wouldn't leak. And we tried really hard to make sure nobody called the cops. We were more worried about the cops than my parents, because my parents knew we were signed to Columbia Records, so they were kind of like, "Oh, this is neat. Let's see what happens."
That gave you this legitimacy in their eyes.
I think for my father, that because Willie Nelson was on Columbia Records.
Okay.
And for my dad, who was a big Willie Nelson fan, he might have thought, but by the end of that third week of it, they were kind of like, "Okay, when are we getting our dining room back?" Because we had the Soundcraft Ghost console on the table, the dining room table, and cables running everywhere. And I had these big taped off notices: "Please do not touch. Please do not move this."
Yeah.
So my poor parents were suffering this
supportive,
total invasion of their home for these 3 weeks. Yeah.
I will also say that dining room table is where Joe and I and you guys did the demo of This Gigantic Robot Kills,
yes.
which is kind of funny.
Yeah, that was fun.
So it's a magical table.
Joe from Patent Pending, who used the same space, the same non-acoustic nightmare space. Yeah.
When did you know that this record was a hit and that the song was like when did you start to get an inkling? Because that must have been crazy, right?
So the first thing I ever felt about Teenage Dirtbag when I finished the third verse, the girl verse, was that I had successfully completed a story. That was like felt like I finished a story. And it felt very much like creative writing class. You've done the assignment. You're going to get a good grade. It's okay. And I kind of always felt like it would touch somebody somewhere. But by the time I was writing it, I had already had a few cynical experiences and kind of like, I remember one time in CB's gallery, I kind of cornered John Kimbrough and like fanned out in front of him a little bit and taught. He got a piece of his cynicism from the music industry, because he had delivered all these incredible records to major labels and found the struggle too much inevitably to bear. And that was like, I was already there when I wrote Teenage Dirtbag. I already heard one of my heroes kind of say, "Don't do it. Like, don't do this to yourself," So all I really thought about it in that context was that it would affect somebody somewhere positively, that somebody would like it. Maybe just my mother,
Right.
and that whatever else happened was very much up to the chaos of things I don't understand or can't control. And all these years later, it kind of still is that. We just got a tweet that said that it went double platinum in Great Britain.
Congrats.
Yeah, and I think that's just England not counting Scotland or Wales, or maybe it is. It didn't say UK. It said British double platinum. So that took 17 years. What do I know about how this works? I know nothing about how this works. That's just proof that like I don't know what's going on.
But so what were things that then, being in a record company in the turn of the century, which seems so archaic now, what were things that they offered you that you couldn't have done yourself?
We were sent on radio tours where we were being used, unbeknownst to us, as a sort of like trading chip. Like, we'll send Wheatus to do an acoustic if you add the Evan and Jaron record. We had no idea that sort of complexity existed, these relationships between the radio people at Columbia Records and the radio stations. This was the old world of radio where program directors really were powerful people who offered the fruits of the world,
And there maybe was payola or stuff behind the scenes.
True gatekeeping, true old school gatekeeping shit that we don't really have a version of today, except for what I guess you would look at if you were looking at Harvey Weinstein ruining the careers of women who wouldn't fucking tolerate his shit. And it was I never experienced anything of that in that regard. There was no sexual favor request or any of that stuff. But there was just as much kind of like power brokering going on. And I think that would come off as sort of like, why would you even have to deal with that today? Like, why don't you just go on your Facebook page and be a YouTuber and build your fan base on YouTube? Like, why would you fuck around with these people? Why would you talk to anybody?
Right.
And also the way we had our first week of sales in America. We came in at like 19,824 records sold or some shit like that. 19,000 and change. And there was this heavy disappointment. Oh, we didn't break the 20,000 psychological mark. We didn't first new bands, like, you got to do 20,000 or else. Can you fucking imagine selling 19,000 records in your first week today?
Yeah.
Like, unheard of,
As a new band.
As a brand new, nobody ever heard of your band. Like,
Well, and you've always said how like Napster and the advent of MP3s were like, first of all, it was very present on those servers, and a lot of people attributed to Weezer, didn't they?
I remember when we were having that meeting about the psychological barrier. It was on the phone. They were like, "Oh, that's why they weren't calling us in to sit down, because it was lower than they had expected." They said the thing about the not breaking the barrier of 20,000, and I said, "Well, what is there anything going on Napster or LimeWire that you could take a look at? Like, can we look at any of that?" And they had no idea what I was talking about. They were like, what? To
show that the single was reacting.
Yeah, like what's the reaction? And it had all happened that summer. Like, the whole thing had happened that summer. The timing was so strange. And in some ways really fortunate, because we immediately began thinking that we were in the wrong relationship. This label thing was like kind of, I don't know, man. And I remember the guys who worked at the computer company I worked at called ASI. They were telling me, I'm not sure, man. Music is software now. And this was like 1997, 98. They were saying stuff like, music is kind of software. It's not it's not a thing anymore. It's going to be on servers. It's not going to work. Like, it's not going to work like it used to. And they didn't really know how else it was going to work. But they were saying to me, like, don't put your stuff on a CD, man. Don't do that. That's software.
Or don't bank on that being your
right.
income,
It's like it's perfect. It's a perfect copy. They'll get regenerative copies out of it. People can bootleg you as if they own the record plant. Like, it's no longer degradation of tape cassettes and stuff like that. It's like you're getting a first generation copy every time you do it.
So you were able to then launch your relationship and your trajectory from this old school corporate machine. And what was the process like going indie and doing the second record?
The second record was written and began recording less than a year after the first one. We were in Australia because we went through this period following the record coming out on August 18th, I think it was, 2000. We were on tour with Zebrahead. we were on tour, and that was a radio tour. So it was like whatever the call letters, whatever the frequency of the radio station was, the price you paid for the ticket.
Okay.
93.5 was like 93-cent tickets, like, and so on. And we did a month on the road with Zebrahead. I look back and I wish that we could have been kind of like better touring partners on that, because we were kind of in this weird spot where we were getting the middle finger every night from people in the front row. And I have to say that in some places we became demoralized. And the reason was Dirtbag was still happening at radio stations in pockets: Chicago, San Diego, Seattle, Portland, Boston, Philadelphia. And we would pull into this market, and Wheatus would have a fucking like 5 a.m. call to go into the radio station and do a morning show. Then we would have a sound check right after that we were late to. And then we would have a show that we were late to. And it was like we couldn't catch up with the way that the tour was routed for a band that got to sleep until 11 a.m. And we were waking up at 5. And we were totally sleep deprived. All of us had bronchitis. And it was like there were periods where it was literally impossible to do what we were set up to do, what we had been sort of tasked with. I don't think Zebrahead saw the best of us. I think they saw a lot of like bleary-eyed, like irritated, like first timers. And they'd been out. Zebrahead had been out a lot.
Yeah.
They were a lot more experienced than we were. And we missed an opportunity to learn from them a bit.
And you were sharing a bus with them?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we was 21 people on a hockey bus.
Wow.
21 guys. It was fucking nuts. After that, we hooked up with SR71. They were cool. And Eve 6 were cool. These are all bands that I mentioned before. The Spotify playlists are now based on that tour.
Right.
And we kind of got a little bit better at it. And then we were set up to do tour dates all the way up through Christmas. And Eve 6 pulled their tour dates. They canceled them. And we kind of made the tactical error of picking them up. We said, this may be the last time we get to do this. We want to stay on the road in America for another month. Let's do it. Let's pick up all the tour dates.
Without them?
Without them.
Yeah.
And it was bad news. That was our playing in front of 2 people in Lawrence, Kansas, and for a month, right through Thanksgiving. And then the first week of December of 2000, Kevin Patrick called me and said, "You are quadruple platinum in Australia. And you have to go there," he said. And I was still sick and so tired. And we were in San Francisco, and it was the first time I ever took a Xanax on a plane. I fell asleep on the tarmac in San Francisco, and I woke up taxiing in Sydney.
Oh my gosh.
I missed the whole 13
That's
hour
great.
flight. Yeah, it was pretty interesting experience.
That was your first time in Australia then?
First time in Australia, and we went from playing in front of 2 people to playing on television. It was really stark difference of and we were almost ready for it, not quite. It was all so by surprise and herky-jerky and erratic, and I can't say that I was in a place to enjoy it the way that I would today, but
it was just it was like being on another planet, I imagine.
Yeah, it was. It was like, what do we even do? What is going on? None of it works out the way that you would even any imagination could prepare you for.
And in subsequent years, your second record did come out, Hand Over Your Loved Ones came out in Australia.
So that was what we did. We said, Australia likes us. Let's move down here for a couple of months and make the second record here, because we can get a good studio. Jimmy Barnes will give us his basement studio to do a record, and we can figure these things out over here. We can't do any of this in New York. I'm not going to ask my mother to give up her house again. We don't have a place to do it.
That would be later. You'd ask her.
So exactly. So we tried to make the second record in Australia, and that was when we got into a lawsuit with our management, and it was like nightmare. Oh my God, we almost got to a point where we're going to do something, and now I have to go back and start talking to an attorney. So we came back to New York, and we got ourselves into a lawsuit. And right after we got back, sometime in March of 2001, Teenage Dirtbag hit number 2 in England.
Mm.
And that summer was the summer of those 2 consecutive top 5 singles, Teenage Dirtbag and A Little Respect, on the English charts, on TV. And that was the era of being like very famous in a place suddenly. Australia, they were kind of like nipping at whether or not we were worthy of being ubiquitous, even though the single had hit really hard down there. When we went to England, it was like, oh, you're going to play for Prince Charles at the party in the park, and you're going to, with David Gray and Beyonce, and oh, you're presenting an award with Alicia Keys, and like all this, like this. It was really like suddenly like, holy shit.
It took almost a year, I guess, a little less than a year.
Took a little less than a year. Between it was about 7 months from the time that Columbia Records had said we were disappointed in the first week's sales in America to the point that we were, hosting television shows in England. And it was a ton of clumsy not having your act together in between.
But I guess one of the things I always have noticed, I've been to the UK with you like multiple times, and like one of the things that's so iconic was you had a great video that was really the old school distribution methods really made sure people saw. And I feel like it captured your personality and the fact that it had these like movie stars in it and like really well produced. And it seems like that was a piece that was a special moment. Would you agree?
Every time somebody tells me that video is a special video, I think of my own personal special moment on the shoot. I was sitting on a milk crate in between shots inside of a tent in California at a high school somewhere. And one of the, I think he was either a set guy or a grip or something, came running over, opened up a box next to me, a road case next to me, and took a huge lens, movie lens, out of it. And I'm just kind of like quietly watching him do this. He's hustling. Everyone's hustling on the set. Mina Savari and Jason Biggs are on the set. Everything's sort of electrified, and I'm just trying to stay out of everybody's way on this milk crate over in the corner. And he closes the box, and he puts the lens down on the edge of the box about 3 feet away from me. Mm. And he turns the other way, and I turn the other way to see what he was looking at. And then I turned back in time to see the lens roll right off the edge of the box and hit the concrete.
Oh.
And he picks it up, and he goes, oh, fuck. I'm going to get fired for this. This is a $150,000 lens. And he said that to me with this look on his face of like absolute disaster. And the first thought that went through my mind is, are they going to charge our account for that broken lens? Is that going to happen? Because we can't afford that. And I was like, the insight there is that I was scared to death that something was going to happen to make this financially unavailable to me. That the money thing was always the thing that was driving what the label wanted to do. And the second it hit a certain threshold, we were gone. They would cut us off. And that was kind of like, coming from the 90s, that was kind of like what I had developed a sense of what things were like. I don't know if they charged us for that. I don't know. I never found out. I was unable to look at any of the line items or anything.
I imagine they were insured like for stuff like that.
Maybe.
And also the thing that like you being on the outside, kind of like not knowing what you're supposed to do, you could have grabbed the lens from falling if you had like agency in that moment. Like he's like, yo,
I couldn't have reached it. No matter how fast I was, I couldn't have reached it. He had put it in a really precarious space on the edge of the far edge of the road case.
$150,000 lens.
And had I, even if I had not glanced up at whatever he was looking at and lunged for it, I couldn't have grabbed it in time. It was just too late. I saw the very top of the lens like this, and it cracked down. It fell long ways onto the onto the bayonet, the mount, and it cracked the mount, and it cracked the first piece of glass inside it.
So it's like that's like a crazy metaphor for how like chaos theory and how little things, even in your moment of victory and like becoming this pop culture,
all these people have assembled around this song,
to
bring something to life. Not necessarily my vision for the video, which was a little bit different, but they're here. They're here in service of this thing, this piece of art. And that might have been the death of it right there. I just saw it.
So-
I just saw this. I just witnessed the death of the whole thing right there. I just saw it.
But it was saved, and it like what happened?
I don't know.
Did he put it back
He
in the case?
disappeared. I never saw him again. He ran off with the lens, and I never saw him for the rest of the shoot. And that could have been because he was doing something else, or because he got fired, or because I don't know. I have no idea. But the lens that he pulled out of there was the one that the director had asked him to go get. So I don't know.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
And now, like a situation like that is you shoot a whole video on your iPhone,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
great
exactly.
video.
Exactly.
And looks just as good.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, the final cost of the Teenage Dirtbag video, I saw one time. I didn't see the line on him, so I saw the final tag was $450,000.
Yikes.
So was 150 from the lens that just fell off the thing? Like, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know.
When you put out your second record, then you were able to negotiate being able to put that out without a label, right?
So we delivered the record to Columbia, and Donnie Einer was no longer there. He had given his job up to another executive, and they didn't like it. They hated our second album. They didn't get Lemonade, which is now our fourth most popular Spotify song. They never released that song. They didn't put it out. So, you know, I remember they brought us in, which was weird. They brought us in to sit us down with the international team and the local Columbia Records New York team, and they all we sat down and they gave us this laundry list of things they weren't going to do. We're not going to pay for TV anymore. We're not going to. You're not getting an American release. We're not releasing your album in the States, which then stopped us from getting our second publishing advance. We had recouped our publishing advance recouped in 6 months. We were like a successful, with the exception of that video, which cost so much money, we were close to being on the recoup side of our first record deal, which was also unheard of.
Right.
Probably because we made it for peanuts in my mother's house.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, they gave us this list of stuff they didn't want to do. They're not making a video. They're not going to do a touring budget at all. They're not going to put it out in America. And it was all a list of like, this is it. We're not doing this. I think that they wanted me to go and record a third album because we were signed for 6. I think they were trying to get me back into the studio for more material.
To see if they were feeling it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think the feeling it was, maybe they didn't even listen.
Right.
You know, maybe somebody had listened and said no, and that infected the rest of the company or something. I don't know. But at the end of them reading us this list of we're not gonnas, the guy who had replaced Donnie Einer looked at me and said, "Well, you've been quiet, Brendan. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this whole thing?" And I said, "Well, if you're not gonna put the record out, I should probably go see if I can get my day job back." And I wasn't being a smartass. I was just like
Being practical.
scared about money. I was just scared about money.
Yeah.
You know, I lived on the Lower East Side in a very expensive at the time apartment on Avenue B in 14th. I mean, and I'm saying expensive. It would make today's rent look like nothing, but it was still very expensive for me. And I knew I needed my job to keep that. So I simply said what my concern was, and they took it in a bad way. They were like, well, if you feel that way, you can take your goddamn record and you can get the hell out of here. And that was them saying, we release you. You're gone. You're done. And that was how we ended our 6-album deal with Columbia Records after our first one was successful.
Because so many artists in that situation when the label didn't want to put out a second record were kind of shelved, right?
Tons of them.
And
and the BMG merger happened after that. So almost the entire class of 2000 our artists was shelved. We're rejiggering the whole thing. 2004 iTunes. You know, when did the iPod come out?
2003 maybe?
2003, yeah. So it was like this whole like whoops.
Wow.
Time to call the old done and start something else. And we got out right before that.
So you had, and then it came out in Australia as Hand Over Your Loved Ones.
That's right.
And
that was
then
the original title of the record.
Was it did it go to radio?
Had a totally botched and like underserved. Like I think that they made 1,000 copies and sent them just sent them in boxes to a couple places.
And then it was never in stores necessarily.
That's right. It wasn't. It was very hard to find. It was like serviced with a whimper, you know.
So then, since then, you've put out 3 or 4. How many records have you put out?
We're halfway through recording our 7th, and we've released 1 single from it so far.
So it's always just amazed me how you've been able to, on the momentum of that moment and continuing to work and engineer your own music, put out so many like DIY records.
Well, they were always DIY records, with the exception of a little bit of work we did in Australia. There was a guy named Brendley who engineered some of that stuff in the studio in Australia in Bowral. With the exception of Whole Amoeba and The Story of William McGovern and Randall from album 2, everything else has without exception been recorded at my house or my mother's house.
So has your writing and recording process changed like over the years?
Yeah, we went after we got out of the deal. I started to reflect on how unprepared we were for some parts of it, and I started focusing on infrastructure and rehearsal, and making sure that if we ever got invited to do anything serious again, we had the stuff to do it. So I think some of our early TV performances are okay, but more often than not, we were kind of scrambling to explain why we don't have Marshall stacks. Why I can't use a Fender Twin, why the drums and the percussion have to be next to each other. Like there was a lot of like, well, aren't you a Green Day style 3-piece? Where's the Marshall stack? Where's your Ampeg SVT? Where, you know, like we were like, no, we don't do things like that. So I rebuilt things to make sure that it was an infrastructure that was stable and reliable and no one would ever ask any questions about. And that was 2003, 2004, then 2005, we put out Hand Over Your Loved Ones. Too Soon Monsoon. After we rebuilt what the band was and rehearsed and recorded the songs live. So it was all of the stuff that I didn't get to do in the 90s to prepare for the first record, we did for the third.
So for the third record, you recorded everything in one take?
It was all single takes.
Wow.
Live performances. We played a song like Something Good, the first song on the record. We played it 256 times. The second time we did it, we trashed the first one. So it was months of standing in a room together with the in-ears, recording multi-track to Pro Tools.
So you were just determined to get it perfect.
Determined to be a live band that could replicate it.
And in the old system, the old model where you were like on another planet, you didn't really have the time or agency to do that yourself before, right? It was kind of like this powerful reclamation of the mechanics.
There was no one at the label or in our management or anywhere who understood that a live band takes process to be arrived at, that is something that has to be developed. And this is long after the 70s and 80s when bands would get a first record to do poorly on, and then a second one to do a little bit better on, and then a third one they really had to hit it. You know, that was over. You got one, it went from you get 3 records to you get 1 record to you get 1 single in each decade.
So you get a month.
Yeah. So you get and then we had a single that did well and they still were like, nah, we're not doing album 2. My goal was always to be an artistic pain in the ass, but not a financial one, and see if that worked. And it didn't. So I thought, well, that's it. I mean, we have to be independent now.
Yeah.
Should have listened the first time, Ian MacKaye.
What do you think of Steve Albini's like production technique? I did a song about him a few months ago for Patreon, and like about how his model just set up the mics and record it. And I don't know, I always felt like your production style reminded me of his.
I think he's a genius.
Yeah.
I think he knows that the most important thing about a good sounding record are the fucked up elements of each individual sound. Not the hi-fi, clean, awesome elements. Yeah, there's a place for that in some recordings, sure.
Uh-huh.
But he is way more interested, in my opinion anyway, in what's going on, what's going into that microphone that is wrong, that is interesting wrong, quote unquote, off the technical map.
Human or grimy kind of.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Or something like that. Something that isn't cut like a cookie, like something weird. Like, why is this snare drum doesn't sound like a snare drum on its own necessarily? That might be a good thing, you know. That's for that reason. In Utero, although those aren't his favorite mixes, In Utero is my favorite Nirvana record. I didn't like Nevermind when I was in college and it came out. I was like, this sounds glossy. Sounds really pretty and polished. And Michael Beinhorn with the Super Unknown record also did something similar with Soundgarden, where their first record was kind of clean and clear, or I shouldn't say their first record. Their first major label hit release, Bad Motorfinger, was slick. And then Super Unknown was like this trash can record that's just had all this humanity to it, and room sounds, and really could see the drums being bashed and things like that. So yeah, for that reason, Steve Albini is definitely one of my favorite engineers.
So what's going on for the rest? What do you have going on this year?
So we're tumbling towards the 20th anniversary of in 2020. It's going to be before you know it.
Wow.
You know, and you know, when you're talking about preparing for a tour, we're going to prepare every single song we've ever done. It's about 75 tunes that we'll have to know how to play, and go out and do a tour where I haven't decided yet. I think we might do a thing where we play the entire album front to back at the end of the night. The first album. Or maybe we'll just pepper it throughout. We haven't done set lists in a long time, but we're preparing for this massive sort of 2020 thing for us, which is a milestone.
Yeah.
And also, we're recording our 7th album. We're in the process of doing that. If you'd like to, maybe you can debut a little bit of it on a little snippet of it on your air. I can send you. That would be cool. The second single, not the first. The first is already out on Spotify. It's called Tipsy, but the second one is called Lullaby. And so far, we've only released it to our Patreon family, patreon.com/Wheatus. But yeah, there's like this library thing going on. We're cataloging, Matthew and I. All the old VHS tapes from us playing the Mercury Lounge and the Luna Lounge are being converted into digital, so we can give somebody a package. And the documentary "You Might Die," 80 Lane and Ian Jones are making a documentary.
I think I talked to them for that. Maybe.
Did you?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Have they been working on it for a few years?
Yeah, it's been going. They started following us around on a tour bus in 2008.
I want to end with one story that you told me that always struck me as like a amazing story about how life can be so random, and how like those moments where you connect with your heroes and things bigger than you are the things that like really resonate. And your story you told me about meeting Kurt Vonnegut is a really cool story.
It was the summer of 1993. I was my friend from high school his parents had a little bungalow on the north side of Southampton, which is where the people who worked and lived there year round lived. This tiny little house, cute little home that they had. And we used to go out there and like kind of like just drive past the rich people and just look and stuff. It was like 4 or 5 times we went out there to hang out. And one of those times, like I said, it was the summer of 93. I had a mohawk, long hair, rest of my head shaved, long hair in the center, and like straggly, like grunge hawk from circa 93. Fishbone hair, I would have called it at the time.
Yeah.
And Angelo Moore was a big hero of mine. Anyway, his parents got tired of us hanging around the house. They're like, "Here's $20 and the keys to the Honda. Go drive into Bridgehampton. There's supposed to be a fair there today of some kind." So Saturday afternoon, these two idiots popped into their parents' car and drove out to Bridgehampton, which was quite a bit more fancy and she than the place that we were coming from. And we went to the Bridgehampton Public Library because Chris wanted to buy some Vonnegut books. he was recently obsessed with Vonnegut from whatever he was studying in Villanova. And I was only vaguely aware of who Kurt Vonnegut was. I didn't know anything about Dresden and the firebombing or him being a POW or any of that stuff. But I tagged along, and we went up to the steps to the Bridgehampton Public Library, and we get to the top, and there's a cover fee you have to pay to get in. It's like $20 a person or something. So that was going to be more than we had. So the security guard was kind enough to tell us that there was a used book sale happening around the corner in the garage behind the library. And so that's where we went, and we went down into this dusty garage. It smelled like mildew and squirrel shit. And Chris picked up a stack, maybe 9 or 10 original first print Vonnegut novels. And when I saw how serious he was about it, and how kind of obsessed he was, I said, "Well, who is this guy, man? Like, what's his story, man? Why do you love this guy so much?" I was 19 years old at the time. I was like, and he said, "Oh man, he's amazing. He's a science fiction guy, and he rolls his own cigarettes, and he fucking survived the firebombing of Dresden in some kind of like meat locker in the basement of a building held by the Nazis. So he was a prisoner of war." And he's going on and on and on and on. And he said, "Well, what does he look like, man?" He's like, "He looks like Mark Twain. Check it out." And he flips open this super old first or second edition of was it Breakfast of Champions, I think. It was a big book. It was a large size, and is a centerfold. Well, not a centerfold. What was the back panel?
Like the dust jacket flap?
Yeah, dust jacket flap had a picture of Vonnegut lying on the grass in a sort of tweed sweater, and a button-down shirt, and like smoking his own rolled cigarette with the Mark Twain mustache and the whole 9 yards. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting looking guy. And I looked up from the paper. We're standing there on the green, and Kurt Vonnegut is walking towards us. It was him. And I looked down again. I thought, I better be right about this, because I'm not going to say that this, and I looked up, and it was him. And I said, and there he is. And I pointed to him. And no sooner did I point it to him, he took the book out of my hand. Kurt did. And Butler at this time, my friend Chris Butler, hadn't said a word. It was just just shock. Yeah. Just utter shock. And he was basically wearing the same thing he was in the picture, which was crazy. And he's flipping through this book, and he's looking at these two idiots with the cut off jeans, kind of early 90s fishbone hair. And Chris has this other version of a mohawk he had curlier hair. So it was like Fido Dido, kind of Fido Dido looking hair, like big hair. And he keeps clocking us. He's flipping through the pages, and he's looking at us. And I kind of got the feeling he thought we maybe had an assignment on him or something, that it wasn't legit. That it was like these kids had been told that they have to go get some Vonnegut books. They're not doing it because they're interested. Mm. And Chris kind of put that to bed by saying, I think he blurted out, like, "You're my favorite author. Like, I can't believe this." I think he said something along those lines, and he just kind of in between. And I'm at this point kind of becoming like hysterical, like I'm kind of like giggling uncontrollably because it's so weird. Yeah, right. I didn't even know who he was. Yeah, I held his picture, and then I shook his hand, like boom, boom, And I subsequently became enamored of his writing, not as much as Chris, but I am really into Vonnegut, and I think he is the heir to Mark Twain, the sort of like absurdist modern language guy. And Chris, I think, had a pen pal with him after that for a few years.
Wow.
Yeah. And
so he ended up signing the books.
Signed the books. He signed the book, and he made this comment while he was flipping through the pages. He goes, "Oh, look how yellow it is. It's so sad." And I had this weird college professor in my last year of college, transcendentalist guy who was teaching us, and I had he assigned Vonnegut at the end of this last semester, and I had gone up to him after class. He went on and on about how Vonnegut was was implying that nothing mattered, that it was all just a big nothing, and so on and so forth. And like an idiot, I went up to this guy and I said, I actually accidentally met Kurt Vonnegut 2 years ago, and he expressed remorse at how yellow the book that we had become. And he had this real sadness about him. And I don't think that he thought it was all a big nothing. Like, I don't think that that's what he's getting at. I don't think that's true, And he gave me a D. After 4 A's on my first 4 papers for this guy, he gave me a D after I said that to him.
Wow.
He fucking tried to fail me.
Did you write an essay about that?
The last novel was Vonnegut, yeah.
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 Wow. Because he felt like you were
Slaughterhouse 5.
Did he think you made that story up, or you just disagreed with
He had an issue with me telling him I didn't do it in front of the class.
Yeah.
I waited until everyone was out, and I relayed a personal story to him about what I thought Vonnegut was really like, and that I didn't take that from his writing. I refrained from arguing with him in class, and he still wasn't happy with me.
Well, that maybe his point in pointing out the yellowing of the pages is that it's a shame that things lose their luster, but there's meaning in it too.
Make me young. Make me young. Make me young.
That's a good thing. That's a good note to end on.
Sentimental.
Yeah, man.
Nostalgia.
But I think that's a cool story because it's like he saw these 2 punk kids, like obviously randomly having a stack of his books, and he was like, oh, this is like a moment. Like, how many times do you think that happened to him in his life? Probably not many, if ever.
I would venture to guess that he never bumped into a pair of fucking like X generation idiots coming out of a shishi garbage book sale in Bridgehampton carrying a stack of only him.
And imagine if you'd gone to the other book sale, you wouldn't have met him.
Wouldn't have bumped into him. And you know what? He was skipping the one you had to pay for. He was headed directly for the garage where we had been. He wasn't even interested in going up those stairs. So it wasn't,
So he was lit. So did he live out there? Like, did you research it later?
We found out that he'd lived out there. Chris got his address in the book that he signed, and he had asked him during our little conversation on the green there, can I write you? And he said yes, and gave him his address along with the signature. And
cool.
And he had a pen pal with him. He had a little pen pal with him for a while.
This very special letters to hold on to.
It's so dope. Yeah.
Brendan Brown, thank you for coming and giving me so much time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, MC Lars. Thank you for having me.
And where is the best place for people to keep updated on the new Wheatus projects?
Wheatus.com and patreon.com/Wheatus. Also, the Twitter account known as @Wheatus is the place that I am every single day talking to people. I will answer any question or talk about any topic. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, check it out. And thank you again. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, thanks for letting me use your mic too.
Oh, sure. No problem. It's yellow. I think you should have one.
It's joyful.
It's joyful.
Missing something caught in Sleep now, my love. We will have so much time when we can get it right. When we wake up. Sleep now, my love. We will be doing fine. We will have so much time when we wake up. When we can carry the groceries, rake all the leaves away, read a story or two. Now fetch me my medicines, all that I need you to. Who will save you now, babe?
So that was Brendan B. Brown of Wheatus, and that was a pretty great interview. Thank you, Brendan, for being on. So any final thoughts about, that episode from my colleagues? They're here, so I want to include them.
I'm going to assume that it was an expertly crafted interview because Brendan B. Brown is a champion of humanity.
Next week, we have the legendary Megaran, and also I want to talk about tour dates. Today, we are in Portland. Tomorrow, we're in Seattle. Then we go to Boise, Salt Lake City, Denver, Kansas City, St. Louis, and then we end this tour in Oklahoma City. And then Frontal Out, you go to Ireland with Wheatus. Is that true?
I think that might be announced already by whatever day it is now when you're listening.
Okay, so Frontal Out's going to Ireland with Wheatus. So, and then Schaefer the Dark Lord, your new record is out, right?
Correct. It's called The Department of Darkness.
Heck yeah. All right. So that's all. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Oh, please, like they always say, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a comment if you want. And if you don't like it, leave a comment. Tell me it's trash.
Click subscribe and like. That's how you use internet.
Smash the, what did it say? Smash the blank like button or whatever. Smash the M blank like button.
Beat those hearts and those thumbs into submission.
All right. So we'll see you soon. And thanks for checking out nerdcoretour.com for tickets. And thank you all for listening. Bye.